welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. And a special thank you to Trültzsch-Wijnen. And I'm so sorry, Christine, because we know each other for so long and I still don't know how to pronounce your name correctly. So, but thank you so much for joining us today. Trültzsch-Wijnen is professor for media education at Salzburg University of Education and associate professor as well at Charles University in Prague, in Czechia. The main focus of her research is on audiences, research, Trültzsch-Wijnen has been part of several international research projects and also networks such as the Cost Action Digilite. And a recent monograph is on media literacy and the effect of socialization that was published in Springer in 2020. And this is precisely the title of our talk today on media literacy and the effect of socialization. Once again, Christine, thank you so much. We are very happy to have you here and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria José, for this introduction. Good afternoon to everybody. And yes, as you already said, I will talk a little bit today about media literacy and the effect of socialization. Therefore, I will share my screen and hope that it will work. So you should everybody see my PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Well, yes. I will first start. As I said, it is a little bit a part of the book that I published. I will talk, after a short introduction, I will talk a little bit about media activity and socialization. Then I will go on and talk about the difference between media competence and performance, which is very important if we are talking about the effect of socialization for media literacy. And at last, I will present two empirical studies in this field. Yeah, let's begin. If we are talking about media literacy, this is a diverse set of skills, knowledge, and abilities that enable an individual to critically reflect media, but also to use media with discernment with regards to others, and in a self-determined way. It is important not only for children and adolescents, but also for adults. And it is acquired in informal and formal learning settings. And as babies today are born in a mediated environment, they develop skills and knowledge from the earliest days, as we, for example, know from studies like from Stéphane Chaudron and others. And also we adults, we never stop learning and gaining media literacy because media are developing, and media development goes on, and we just have to adapt to the new media developments also as adults. But what I'm especially interested in, or what I want to focus on today, is that we have various studies from different perspectives that have similar results. And this result is that young people with a higher level of formal education and from milieux with a higher socioeconomic status appear to be more critical with regards to media and to be more self-determined with regards to media and have a more varied media repertoire. This is also true for adults, but I'm more interested in children and adolescents. And still, there's the question, why is this? Why do we have these results in the empirical studies? And this is the focus of my today's talk. So if we go back to media literacy, then I think we all agree that a broad definition is the most accepted at the moment. An example is the UNESCO Paris Declaration, but we have a lot more. And we have a lot of definitions on media literacy, but most definitions remain normative and have a lack of reference to its socially embeddedness. But if we want to answer this question, we need to understand media literacy as a social practice and to focus on the practical sense of media activity. And this already brings me to the second point, and this is media activity and socialization. And we can look at this from different academic disciplines. One is sociology. There we focus more on the individual and its social environment. Psychology has a different focus. It is stronger focus on the individual and how it deals with influences from the social environment. This is very important if you want to understand why certain media content is important for certain people, or to understand why specific ways of using media and dealing with media are important in certain phases of the life circle. We also have cultural studies. They focus more on the understanding, the negotiation of meaning and the understanding of different approaches to media. And of course, we have the communication and media studies, which is our field. There, our most important concept is the concept of the active users that we have in different theoretical approaches. And we have also the field of education, and there are learning theories are also important when we are discussing media literacy. But for today, I want to keep the sociological view and focus more on this perspective. And this could be one possibility of answering these questions. Of course, there could be more from different disciplines, but I will try it with this perspective. And if we talking about sociology and such approaches, then it says that individuals are able not only to adapt attitudes, values, and norms, but also to actively construct, interpret, and change them. And even more important is that different people can perceive one and the same object in different ways, even if they may be largely in agreement about the shape of the object in questions. And this is also very true with regards to media content. Another concept of sociology which is important for answering this question is the life world concept. And the life world is what is certain and familiar to an individual, and it is based on our everyday experiences, based on the things that are taken for granted in this social environment of the individual. And this life world provides also the foundation for communicative action and the construction of meaning, but also the emergence of attitudes and belief. And in this life world, we develop a kind of everyday life practice with regards to different things, but also with regards to dealing with media. And this is very important for us. And another theory that comes from sociology, which is also very important for our question, is Bourdieu's field theory. And this is a big theory, but there, especially the concept of habitus and the concept of social distinction is important for us. So what does that mean concretely? The habitus is, as defined by Bourdieu, a result of prior experiences that are reflected in schemata of perception, thought, and action. This means these prior experiences are influential for our way of life, for that what we take for natural and for granted. And these experiences are these experiences that come from the life world of an individual. This habitus also determines the perceptions and judgments of the social and material world, and also the structures of individual and collective action. And from this habitus, we develop the so-called practical sense. This is again that individuals act as it seems natural and normal to them. This is what habitus actually means. So with regards to media, it's the same. Individuals integrate media into their everyday life against the background of their internalized amount of thought and action. Important for how we are dealing with new experiences, or how are we dealing with media content, and or how are we using media. And this media related habitus also arises from our prior experiences, which are media socialization, our media biography, what we are used to in dealing with media, experiences with media, and also media education. Here we have a graph that shows how this media-related habitus is integrated into our socialization. The media habitus is part of the more general habitus, and it is influenced by various factors. At one hand, it is influenced by the education and socialization in the family. This also means that the habitus of the whole families, the habits and the beliefs, and also dealing with media in the family is very much influencing an individual. But these beliefs of the family and these habitus of the family is also influenced by the social milieu of the family, which is also, again, a product of its economic capital, the cultural capital, that means the education of the family, of the parents, the knowledge of cultural goods, but also the social capital, the relationships to other people are important for the social milieu in which we are growing up. But it is not only our parents, it is we also have peers and friends, and we're also going to school, to kindergarten, to work, to clubs. The culture in which we are growing up is also important for the development of our habits as habitus, and our beliefs, and the way how we are leading our life. And this kind of individual way of life is, of course, also influenced by the society as a whole, which means the culture in which we are growing up, but also economic and political preconditions, or also the media system, in the sense of what is available for us, where do we have access to. This is also important for us. So another concept. So habitus is one thing that is important, and the other thing is social distinction, because Bourdieu says that social differences, so being a part of a specific social milieu, is dependent on the economic, culture, and social capital of people that having similar habitus, similar beliefs, are forming one social milieu, and they have many similarities in the conduct of their everyday life, in the cultural needs, and in their social practices, which also means the taste, the ideas, the values, and the views of the world. And people who have this same way of life, and are building the same milieu, they also want to distinguish each other from other milieus, from people that have another conduct of life. And this distinction is also important. So we want to distinguish ourselves from others because we believe that our way of life is, of course, the best. So, but in how far this can be important for education or media education. And education has one example that has been researched in several studies also in the field of education. This is the effect that children that come from a family that is socially nearer to school or to education have an advantage to children that come from milieus that are not so near to education. And it is because they have grown up with a different habitus. This means they are talking a different language. So if you are from a milieu that is nearer to education and to school, you probably speak the same language that is spoken at school. You have habits that are valued at school, and you have a certain motivation to learn. But if it is not the case, then you might speak another language, which means a certain dialect that is not so accepted at school. You have probably different habits. For example, that you are more focused on visual media content than on written text and written media content. And perhaps you have also another motivation to learn. Other things are important for you. These are the reasons therefore. And now, of course, your question, what has this all to do with media literacy? And before we can answer this, we have first to have a little more, a better look on what is media literacy. And there I also want to point on a specific thing. That this is the difference between competence and performance. And we have to understand what media literacy really is and can be. And therefore we have two different theoretical concepts. One is media literacy. Everybody of us knows us because this is dominant in the international discourse, and it is also a very good concept. So I would always strive for talking about media literacy and working with this term rather than talking about media competence, which is more relevant in a German language sector. But still, there is a small difference between these two concepts, and this small difference is important to further understand why we have these results that people of different social milieus might have a different media literacy. And the difference is media literacy comes from the English language area, and it originally comes from a difference between being literary, that means knowing the works of culture, and literacy in being able to read and write, but you perhaps don't have to know the works of culture. And in the literacy discourse, we also make the difference between those who are literate or more literate and those who are not literate. Media competence comes more from the field of linguistics and communication theory. And the big difference is that there is a difference made between the competence as skills and knowledge and the performance as actual practice, action and behavior. And it is also seen, people are seen to have a certain competence. So everybody has a certain competence, but there are differences with regards to the performance. And this is very interesting for us, because then we can pose another question. And this is why then do individuals perform differently, even if they could have a similar level of competence? I tried to give an answer of that, or I tried to make a suggestion how this could be approached. And if we see media literacy as media competence, then we have on the other side, we have media performance as how we are dealing with media, our media activity. And of course, these two things are interrelated, because our media literacy, our competence in the sense of knowledge and skills and abilities, is of course influencing our media performance, the way how we are dealing with media. And the other way around, when we are dealing with media, this is also influencing our competence, skills when we are dealing with media. So there is an interrelation. But what is really interesting is that this interrelation is moderated by different factors, and these factors are important if we are further talking about why there could be differences in media literacy. This, I think we don't need this slide. This is what I just said. So this transfer is moderated by certain factors. So the question is, what factors could this be? And one important factor is that I think is very important is this practical sense I was talking about, this practical sense that comes from our everyday life, from our life world, this practical sense that is part of our habitus, which means the things that we are used to, our values, our interests, our way of life, but also norms and values. This is our practical sense, and this is very important. But also age is important, because we know also from studies that we have different levels of literacy regarding to the age of children and adolescents. And this is also because we have to consider the cognitive development, developmental tasks, moral development, the development of the ego identity, all these psychological parts of the development of an individual are of course important and are a factor that is influencing media literacy. And there are of course other factors, but they still have to be researched. So this is a big research gap, which factors are moderating the transfer from media literacy to actual practice. But I will now concentrate on those two factors that I have found out that they are really of importance. And this is age, as I have said, because this acquisition of competence and also this transfer, the ability of applying the knowledge and the skills is age dependent. And we have this information from different studies that the ways how children and young people are dealing with media is dependent to their psychological development. And also, for example, that developmental tasks, like, for example, puberty, are very much influencing our way of how we are dealing with media. And then we have also this practical sense. And in this practical sense that we have different kinds that are motivation, because motivation is influencing our use of our knowledge and skills. For example, we can know that we have a certain knowledge, but we have to have a motivation to, for example, circumvent an internet filter that is set up by our parents or by our school. So if we don't have the motivations, we might have the knowledge and the skills, but we don't mind. But if we have a certain motivation, we try to get through this internet filter. But also the deployment of cognitive master of rules and the ability of critical reflection. We might be able to critically reflect internet content. We might have the ability to know the rules, how to deal with media, but if we are really bothering, it's a factor of motivation. So if we are bothering to compare different sources of information, or if we are configuring our privacy settings, or searching for Creative Commons material, so even if you know that this might be useful, it is a question of motivation if we are really doing it in our daily media use. But also in better and important manner, media experiences contribute to the development of media competence, which means that we are gaining further knowledge and further skills by using media, is also a matter of motivation, because this will only be happening when this makes sense in our daily life. If we don't need this knowledge or these skills, then we will perhaps we won't learn something because it is just not important for us. And then we also have this habitus, this example that I just gave with regards to school and the cultural fit to school, this is also the case with regards to media, can be the case with regards to media, because we have, through our habitus, certain norms, values, a particular media taste, and some forms of media use that are internalized, that we are used to, that are normal for us. And there is a certain cultural fit if you're feeling comfortable with a particular way of media use. And this may be different because people have a different different media taste and different internalized forms of media use that is learned in the family, for example. So two individuals could well have the same media competence in the form of knowledge, skills, and so on, but they could nonetheless show differences in the media performance or not equally interested in distinguishing themselves by the means of legitimate media use. That means if people are not familiar with text-based research, then it is not so easy for them because they have not learned it at home or even at school. Or perhaps other people try to distinguish each other from other milieus if they want to show off with information-based media use, and they want to distinguish each other from those people who are more entertainment searching in the media. And if I want to distinguish myself, then I really try to show off and to be media literate, or to show of being media literate, and others, for example, might just not care about that. And also from this transfer from media experience to really the competence, which means the learning of skills and learning of behavior and things how to deal with media, is also dependent on the context of everyday life. It is our developmental tasks are important, but it can also be gender related, or our motivations and interests, the identification within a peer group or the general social environment are important, because it is always the question of, does it make sense in our life? So we will only learn something from dealing with media, or even if we have media education at school, it will only help us if we feel that it makes sense in our life. Otherwise, we will just get the information or deal with media and learn a little bit about that, have a little bit of knowledge, or learn a little bit, or get new skills, but we will perhaps forget them very quickly because they do not make sense. And this, I now want to get away from theory and have a little bit more empirical results, and I want to discuss empirical results, and I have now two examples where I will just try to answer this question from the beginning. So how can we interpret empirical data in the light of these theoretical considerations that I just was talking about? How can we empirical these results that young people from different social milieus seem to have a different kind of media literacy? And the first study I want to talk about is about the old one. This is data shows by adolescents, but I've made a secondary analysis of this data, with particular interest on these questions. How can we interpret these our empirical data? And from this study, we have two results. The one result from the study was that young people with a higher as well as with lower levels of formal education have similar abilities with regards to dealing with the media content, being critical, discovering scripted reality, and so on. But those with a higher level of formal education initially appear more critical and more reflective in their approach to media. So at the first glance, they seemed to be much more media literate. But in the second step, this wasn't the case. So yes, the question is, how can we explain that? And we can explain this if we try to read between the lines of our empirical results. And if we have a closer look, then we can see that young people with higher SAS and higher education assume a very critical and reflective attitude towards top model shows, because they have an internalized legitimate media taste, which is dismissive of entertainment-oriented reality TV formats. And at the same time, they have a personal conflict between their social desirable response. So they know, or they seem to know, they believe that an information-oriented media use is much more media literate. So they try to say, well, I'm watching these reality TV formats, but in fact, I'm not really interested in. But in reality, they really like those formats, but they try to be extra critical as to be socially desirable. And they also reported that popular television content is critically discussed at home, but also at school. And as they are used to this critical discussion of media content, they are able to express media criticism in appropriate ways. And then we have, on the other hand, lower SES and lower educated young people. They have another media taste. Their media taste is more entertainment oriented. So for them, it does not make sense to have such a critical distance to this media projects, because they don't feel that they have to behave different or to the habit of critically discussing media content. This is not the case at home, but also at their schools, at the lower schools. Media content was not so critically discussed, so they were not used to it. And also, if we were talking to them, you saw that they are not less critical of top model shows, but they had really difficulties to express their criticism. It was more indirectly, and they had also trouble to find the right words for their critique. So at the end, we could say that they were not less media literate, but they had a lack of cultural capital, in the sense of less media education at home and at school. They had another legitimate media taste, and they had another language. So they were not able to express their criticism properly. And in another study, we tried to go more into this topic and get deeper into this question of why are there such differences. This is an actual study, a broader study with a huge quantitative survey on how young people are approaching the social web. We also had a qualitative subsample with 50 single cases, which was also rather big for a qualitative study. And we did not only interviews in the qualitative studies, we did also participant observation when young people were browsing the web and thinking aloud when they had to solve specific tasks in dealing with the internet. And we used habitus hermeneutics according to Bourdieu. And at the end, we combined the quantitative and the qualitative data with semantic differences and with typification. When you are working with Bourdieu and when you are talking about social milieux, then of course you have to define it. And in this study, we defined it with regards to the education of the parents and children, the parental occupation, but also the importance that parents and children gave to the success in education and training, as well as the lifestyle of the family, if it was more traditional, mainstream, modern, or cosmopolitan. And with these factors, we could define several social milieus. And in our results, we could find 5 different types of dealing with media and media content, particularly with regards to the internet. And these 5 types were related to specific social milieus. So we had 2 that were one that was more relating to the middle class of social economic status and education, and 2 that were more relating to the lower SES groups and education groups. Because of time, I don't want to get so much into detail into the different groups of dealing with media. For us now, and for the answering of our question, it is more important or more helpful to stay on a more general level. I want to describe these differences between these different types with the help of this figure. This figure shows the semantic differentials of these different types. And we got this by making a polar profile for every single case of the 50 single cases. And this graph shows the mean of every type of media activity. So every type had a special mean. And what you see here in blue are the attributes corresponding to Bourdieu's description of habitus, the way of life that people are living. What is in green is the media habitus. This is specific habits and attitudes with regards to media, like, for example, the media economic capital, or more information focused, or less information focused, or a high cultural media taste, or also the kind of media regulation. And the last, the yellow point, is the results regarding media literacy and competence, skills and knowledge with regard to different tasks that they had to solve in the internet. And what we can see here is that type 1 and 3, these are the conformists and experts, are clearly more on the left-hand side in the polarity profile. We have one type 5, that is generally situated in the middle of the polarity profile. And when it comes to the media competence, then it is more on the left side as well. And then we have 2 types that show a clear tendency to the right-hand side. But what does this say with regards to our question? We can see in this graph that children and adolescents from types on the left-hand side are more likely to belong to a middle and upper educational milieu and tend to be guided by a legitimate media taste. And in their media performance, more critical and more reflective. And young people from types on the right-hand side are more likely to belong to the middle and lower educational milieus, and they are less guided by legitimate media taste. And in their media performance, they seem to be less self-assured, less confident in searching information, and, at least at the first glance, as less critical and less reflected. What does this say in detail? If you now compare the higher SES and the lower SES young people, then we see with higher SES and better educated people that they have really strengths in reproducing abstract knowledge about media. They have an internalized legitimate media text. They have good skills in dealing with written tests, with media criticism, and in evaluating media content. And what is also very important, they are used to perform in a situation of knowledge testing. While they have a strong abstract knowledge, they are often not able to apply their knowledge to the actual media behavior. Sometimes they have a knowledge, but they behave totally different when they are really browsing the internet. And the lower educated young people, they have strengths in application-oriented knowledge. They often have a lot of technical skills, but they are often less important or even condemned in the field of school, like, for example, illegal downloading. they do not conform the legitimate media taste. They often have problems with written text because they have just problems with reading and writing in general. And they are also less familiar with particular tasks. For example, they're less familiar with searching information because they're not used to, or evaluating media content. They are not familiar with that. But if they are really have the same abilities and skills, they're also less able to display this in a situation of knowledge testing because they don't know what is important in a test. So they have not so good results just when we are testing this. So what were the factors that were influencing these results? This was at the one hand, of course, the age, the mental and physical maturity. So there was, of course, a difference between the younger ones and the older ones, but even more the needs and challenges of the life world. So what was important in their daily life? They had the competences that were important for their daily life, but not more. And also the habitus of the family, so information-oriented, text-based research. In other, for example, the lower SES children, they were more visually searching. They were more searching for YouTube videos instead of. It was very important in with regards to media education, and the cultural fit and social distinction were also moderating factors. But so what can we conclude? It is that young people that are confronted with the same developmental task and have a similar needs with relation to media still differ in strategies for media activity because they have experienced different media socialization, media education in their social environment, at home and at school, and because they have internalized a different media habitus and media-related taste. And the crucial factor for these differences was this practical sense associated with media activity. So young people in general might have the similar abilities and skills and a comparable level of knowledge about media, but they can still differ in their media performance. So we can say that better educated young people from higher SES backgrounds might not really be more literate, even if it seems so at the first glance from our empirical data, but they are more familiar with specific ways of dealing with media. And therefore we have to be very important when we are interpreting our empirical results. And we have to be aware of this relation between media performance and media competence. So this actual media activity is relating to literacy, to skills, but there are a lot of factors that are influencing this media performance. And we have also to be very careful when designing empirical studies, because also in this last study, when we were in the data analysis, we found out that we had some questions and some in our tests that did not fit to the social reality of lower educated young people. So even if we are designing a study on media literacy, we have to look at the cultural fit of our questions. And we also have to be sensible when it comes to media education in formal settings, because we also found out that it is media education does only really work and help if it makes sense to the young people in their daily life. Otherwise, it is just something that they are learning at school and forgetting afterwards. But if it is really, it makes really sense in their everyday life, then they will also acquire this knowledge and these skills and these abilities and make use of them. So this was my first introduction into this topic, and I very much welcome your in a short time. I wrote more in this book on media literacy and the effect of socialization, also more discussing how you can answer this question from different fields of research, but perhaps I can give some more answers in our discussion.
Thank you so much, Christine, for this very inspiring talk. Do we have any questions from our audience? Is there any brave person that wants to jump in with a question?
I would like to ask a question. It
Okay,
might not be
you,
brave, but
Andrea.
ask.
Yes.
I would like to know how we can give that sense. If we are talking to a diverse audience, how can we teach media literacy, or how can we make it make sense for a diverse audience in particular?
I think it is important to start with talking about their everyday media experiences that might be very different. So what are they used to? What is their normal way of when they are searching something? Their normal their preferences. What kind of media do they like? And if we start with this daily media use, which might be different, and if we value this daily media use, so it wouldn't make sense if you teach them how to use search engines and to do text-based research. It is better to have a look, what are you doing if you want to know something in the internet? Are you using the internet? What are you doing? And if they say, yes, I'm looking on YouTube or things like that, then you can say, yes, okay, that's good. That is one way, which is not worse than text-based research. It is just another kind of doing research, but also when you are doing visual research, you should, for example, try to get different results, compare different results, and perhaps then also try to read something on Wikipedia. But still, Wikipedia is often too complicated for lower SES people.
So any other question? Oh, sorry, Christine.
Was this? Did I give you a good answer, or do you want other examples on that?
No. I was just also curious about this, the social importance, because I wonder always how we can give, how can we make it relevant also in a wider sense. I think the motivation to for some people can seem irrelevant because they have maybe different problems to deal with in their everyday life. But how can we yes, teach or convey the relevance?
I think we should give very much attention to these everyday problems of the people, and start with the everyday problems, and then look where are media relevant with regards to these problems. Because in certain ways, media have an influence, because we are using media all the time. Our smartphones, the internet is available all the time, so it will probably be part of their problem. But we should start with the everyday life and the everyday problems.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna George.
Hi, thank you, Christine, for this inspiring talk. I had watched some of your presentations before and read, but this was also very inspiring, and inspiring to me with regards to making sense of the project that we're working on right now about this connection. So we've been struggling with the also the idea of social economic status and how to measure that, because we're trying to compare across countries. And so this was very inspiring also with regards to life world perspective. So I would ask you, how would you make this? Is this a model that could be easily transposed into cross-national studies, that you could have ways to easily measure these parameters for cultural capital? Do you see this?
It could be possible, because we were very much referring to Bourdieu, and there is a study. Bourdieu is from the 1980s, so rather old, but there is a study I didn't know the authors at the moment, but who tried to apply these factors in the British society, a total different society, and it works. And of course, the society changed, but still, these factors of these sociological study from what you do still work, and I think they would work also internationally, but of course, we have to be careful with regards to this cultural capital, because this can be different even in Europe. So we can give different importance to different media content, for example. So if we, I think it would be a very good national comparison, but as you know from other projects like UKids Online, could only be a starting point, and then you would have to discuss these national peculiarities to get a good instrument for this international comparison.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from an Oliveira that is having some problems with internet connection. So in the chat, I will read it. So Anna asks, I'd like to ask you about formal settings and an old discussion that has been going for many years now. And she asks, how do you see the integration of media education in these formal settings in order to make this connection with everyday use, and also as a singular discipline or as a transversal subject?
This is a classical question, and it is difficult to answer. We had a lot of discussions if it should be a single discipline or if it should be integrated in other subjects. I mean, if it is integrated in other subjects, we have this situation in Austria, and we end up with the problem that it is then very much dependent on the single teacher if he or she is really doing it or not. If it is a specific subject, then we have another problem that it is just, young people might think, okay, it's just another subject like mother tongue or math or anything like that. So suddenly it does not feel relevant. The best solution would be both. And still, I personally think that it is better to integrate it into a lot of subjects, because you have children and adolescents that have their favorite subjects. And if it is integrated in every subject, so probably also in the subject which is your favorite subject, and if it gets something very normal in school life, so every time when we are using media as didactical tool, so as a teacher, then we can also take this as a chance to talk a little bit about media. So if we are using a picture or a video or things like that, which is normal in school, then we could also, for example, just say a little bit about Creative Commons, or say a little bit about doing research, or just so this normal connection with media that we have in our daily school life can be used for media and for media literacy education. But the problem is then really the teachers have to be trained very good, and it is also a factor of the motivation of the single teacher. So if the teacher is not motivated to do that, then he or she won't do that. So it is difficult to answer this question. In an ideal case, it would be perfect if it is integrated in all subjects. It would be a normal part of school. It would not be something special. And ideal, it would also say that teachers, not only with regards to media, but also with regards to other topics, should start with the everyday life experiences of their pupils in order to make their topics relevant for them. But this ideal school doesn't exist, unfortunately.
Any other question? I might have a question. Well, I could have a lot of questions and also reflections, but I will just ask you if during your research, in these two researches that you presented, or in any other research with different generations, did you find any intergenerational aspect that you could highlight, meaning how can the intergenerational approach between different types of generations, for instance, that could improve some of the other generation media literacy.
So that they could learn from each other.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yes, I think there are various possibilities, particularly if it is often talked about that this generational gap between the teachers and the pupils. And I think the most important thing, there are some basic skills and abilities that we need to deal with every kind of medium. For example, this critical reflection, or also this trying to compare different kinds of media, or also to be aware of what is more entertainment media, what is information media. And this knowledge is important with regards to every kind of medium. It does not stop with the digital media, but it is also important with this more classical media. So there is some of the knowledge, this for the media worlds of the young people. And I think they could perhaps inspire each other, because perhaps some topics are more or less important in a different media environment. And if they start to talk about each other, then, and also about how relevant it is in their daily life, then this could be a starting point for a better understanding of each other, and also for helping each other. For example, when in my teacher education courses, I often start with the media biography of the teachers. So they have to think about how they used media when they were at primary school or at secondary school. And suddenly they discover that was not so different from how young people are using media today. They are using different media, but the purpose was pretty much the same.
Thank you so much. Any questions, new reflections upon Christine's talk? No? May I, because we could have some more minutes, it's more like a reflection, and if you want, you can answer. Because even with interactive and internet access in these last decades, we can see that the gap between people with different, let's say, so to use the Bourdieu concepts, people with different habits and also with different cultural capitals, we can see the gap between them still, and your research shows that. And I'm quite sure that if we would be applying your model in Portugal, we would have a huge gap between both types of young people. This is kind of, in a way, it's sometimes we think that we are always in a dead end without any further hope of diminishing clearly the gap between them. I don't know how you feel about that, or if you want to.
Well, I think it will never be possible to close this gap, because we also have, in the sense of Bourdieu, our social distinction. From the others. So this difference will always be, but what is still important, even if they have a different attitude towards media, it would be important at the school also to understand those who are not so much education oriented, and to help those, and not only concentrating on this, what would be the ideal way of using media from the perspective of the academics or the teachers. So from our perspective, so that our way of using media, dealing with media, is the best one, and everybody should adapt to that, because this is also a kind of distinction. We should just recognize this difference and try to find ways to connect to the worlds and the kind of media activity of other social milieus, and try to help them in the context of their beliefs, in the context of their everyday life, and what they are needing in their everyday life.
Thank you so much. So, any left question to Christine? No?
Just a comment. I think
Okay,
that's also
please, Anna.
a good point from Christine, is also how it leads us to be very reflexive about our methods. So and critical about what comes out of our studies, depending on how they're constructed and the portraits they give. And so Bourdieu also talks about this, your role as a social scientist, and this may create an effect of reality for these same groups. So this means we have extra pressure or extra responsibility to look again at our own methods and what they may generate. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if we don't have any more questions, we will close our session. Let me just tell you that in the next weeks, for participants that are part of this MeLCi lab, we will send you information for a meeting in January, on the 14th of January. Still, we don't know the exact hour, but soon you will have more details. And also more details about the next webinar. And now I really want to thank you all, and also especially to Christine for this great talk that inspired us, and that will lead us for sure to new reflections in our research. Thank you so much, Christine.